So I'm going to start off deliberately vague. We have a trusted messaging working group at MEF, which we formed over a year ago. And we formed it to deal with a problem. So I'm gonna let Tor explain to us, why did we create this trusted messaging group? What's the problem? What aren't we doing in industry that we needed this working group?
Well, hello everyone. I wasn't here from the beginning. I think it was a longer initiative. It is a big problem. It's a big challenge we have when talking about trust in messaging, and as we've heard this morning, it has many aspects to it. There is no single solution that push a button and this is going to be solved. That is very clear. Very often when we talk about it, we end up talking about technical solutions. We can do this and it will be solved. We can talk about, you name it. You know it. We have heard it all morning. Let me try with an analogy, and let's be honest about where we stand. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but so be it. Imagine a road network with companies delivering packages, small packages to consumers. On this road network, there's lots of trucks, big ones, small ones, driving around, thousands of them. Typically anonymous, don't have a company name on the side, and they're handing packages to each other. Sometimes the vans are not locked at night, so during transportation you can put packages in there. Inside these lorries here, you have packages. Some of them are harmless, wanted by customers, but very often they can be toxic, they can be dangerous. Very hard for anybody on the roadside, whether it is police or anybody else, to police it. Yes, there's a code of conduct, but nobody doesn't have to follow it. The drivers may often don't have driver's licenses. The vans don't have number plates. The drivers can have multiple number plates and put on the one that they like for convenience. And they're driving around. And what happens, the output is that you have consumers that then have packages arriving back home. Many end up with a dining room table full of packages they don't dare to open because they don't know who sent them. Others are scared from the experiences in the past, and they, I don't open the door for these delivery vans anymore. So the packages, the good ones, don't even arrive. This is a bleak picture. Maybe it's not this bad, but I think many of the messaging ecosystems, when we're honest about it, actually have similarities to this situation here. So we have to really then think about what will it take to make a dent, to make a difference. And as we spoke about this morning, we are at the crossroads, and it needs to be done at scale, and it needs to be done properly. And if not, why bother? So this initiative here, in this group, we looked at what will it really take, what is the glue that can keep it together, and give visibility to the ecosystem of these packages that are floating through, so that anybody will know what's inside them. You can actually trace back to who sent the message. Message package. Who sent it, so there is accountability in this system here. Who licensed or approved the trucking company to be allowed to send messages? Was there anybody checking their background to see if they should be in this business? Can we trust the identity of the brands? Did anybody check the identity of the brands? Did they have the equivalent of a driver's license that you have in other industries for the brands who are sending packages, or can you make up who you are? So the bottom line is that we are lacking many of these control mechanisms that exist in other industries.
Yeah.
Then,
I would say, like, you're saying maybe it's not as bleak as you're portraying it, but it is pretty bleak. And we've had presentations from Steph just earlier around the amount of regulation that we're seeing globally. And we're just seeing more and more intervention by regulators because whether it's right or not, maybe it's political, governments feel like they need to intervene in this market because the industry is just not doing enough to stop fraud. And for those of you who operate in Ireland, you'll be very well aware that that ComReg, the Irish regulator, has put in place some pretty draconian rules around registering SMS sender IDs that the industry will find pretty costly to implement. And that might impact revenue also in the sense that it could reduce the volume of SMSs, certainly for small and medium-sized businesses. We're seeing it in Australia. Steph was talking about it in Spain as well. So the picture is not great if, as an industry, we'd rather be able to operate in a global market where we don't have different sets of rules that we have to navigate depending on which market where we operate. This becomes increasingly complex and costly for all of us. So how do we show the industry that governments that we're doing something about it as an industry? And maybe that's a good segue to you, Ellie, and you can talk about what it is we're trying to do in our working group.
Fine. Thank you very much, Nick. Thank you very much, Tor, for that introduction. First of all, just to reiterate my previous offer, anyone who heckles Dario in a really good way, unlimited tequila shots. Okay, that is the offer, right? But it's unlimited. That means you've got to go all the way. All right, that's the goal here. So I think we've heard today, I think 2 or 3 macro points. Number one is we are at an inflection point, generally, right? As an industry, looking back at the last 20, 30 years, we're finally reaching that point when the growth that we've seen, whether it's the 16% smoothing out to 3%, and now we're beginning to see that the beginning of that decline. And we as an industry have to do everything that we can to help restore trust. The interesting point is that this is not something that is unique to the SMS side. This is likewise being felt very much on the voice side. I'm involved in a couple of industry activities on the voice side. There's a common factor behind this, which is all about restoring trust. And as we've heard kind of from Tor and from others today, in a way, the starting point on that restoring trust is making sure that you, as a citizen consumer, when you are receiving a call or when you are receiving a message, that you're confident that that message that is coming from Barclays Bank is in fact coming from Barclays Bank. That green tick that you would love to see to confirm and give you the confidence that this entity is the entity that's being represented will be a very important part on that level of restoring trust, again, both on the voice side and on the messaging side. The Trusted Messaging Working Group, which was set up just over 2 years ago, at the sort of the behest of the industry, and very much thanks to Dario and the team for kind of giving the impetus for helping to create that Trusted Messaging Working Group. The goal is, how can we look at this? Look at all the activities that are taking place around the world today. So there's 7, 8 countries that have already adopted the concept of some form of national registry, some form of brand registry, some form of send ID registry, all different variations of that theme. USA, Singapore, Australia. Obviously, we've heard this morning from the MEF activities here in the UK, Ireland, Spain. And then we look at it on a bigger picture, which is how many of the regulators are now kind of, in a way, jumping onto that bandwagon, but quite sensibly so, to say that actually we need to help implement these registry structures because they bring a very important level of trust back into the industry, because you are verifying, you are KYCing, you are right to use checking, all about that enterprise to restore the trust. And the idea being, looking from an MEF perspective, is if we look at all of these initiatives taking place around the world, either industry-driven or regulator-driven, it's quite important to make sure that we kind of bring some common architecture, some common principles to ensure we don't end up with 220 different countries with 220 different implementations of this. That's not going to be helpful for us as an industry, and certainly will not be helpful for the global enterprises who are faced today with having to deal with each of these headaches per country. So we've taken a kind of a proactive approach to say, rather than kind of react to each kind of regulator that's popping up, let's come out with a set of principles, with an architecture structure, a governance structure. We're not yet up to the technology. That's the level that we're just about to start now, but is looking to kind of create the fundamental principles that will enable a national registry to be able to provide that trust, restore that trust at the enterprise level. And one of the important factors of that is the governance layer. One of the important factors of that is the KYC layer. Companies in this room here are expertise in that. And really, that's a way to help drive the adoption of trusted communications back into this industry. In a way, RBM is helping that journey, because RBM's delivering now the concept to the end user of, here's a green tick, Here's a trusted entity that has either been trusted by the MNO or trusted by Google. So it's kind of the first time we're really seeing, as end users, that kind of little green tick to say this is the trusted entity. We, as an industry, need to make sure we can echo the plus side of that, of delivering a verified brand, a verified identity, as much and as fast as we can. That is the goal behind Trust and Registry Work Group. After 2 years, we came up with our first set of key principles. Yes, it took 2 years for that work to happen, thanks to Tor, and it was a very active team, thanks to Nick. But we got there, and right now the stage that we're working with is working with the hyperscalers and global enterprises for their feedback on the principles that we've identified. So far, the feedback has been really positive, so we're really excited about this. We're waiting for that to complete, and then we'll bring it back to the wider membership and see how we can take that forward. But this could be an important, in this inflection point, an important foundation of restoring trust in communications.
Yeah, I mean, you might think it sounds overly ambitious, so let's not scare everyone away. Are we talking about a global set of principles from day one? I don't think so. I don't think that's a realistic ambition. But perhaps we can start talking about a regional approach. So perhaps we can start talking.
I think it's also about establishing the starting point for what is the minimum you can expect from a customer's point of view. Mm-hmm. Take one word, traceability, back to packages, back to messages. It should be reasonable to expect that what you receive actually has, the parties involved would put their name, the brand puts their name on the package, and the delivery company puts either DHL on it or whatever it is, so you know what it is. So that at least when something happens, you call the operator is able to check it for you. Not necessarily the customer, him or herself, but quickly, easily go back and trace it all the way back and implementing accountability. We feel that unless you establish this minimum here, this will just go on, and we will not regain or win any trust. So the principles we have come up with are fairly high level. We try to keep it to 10 or 12, 15 in that range. Plain language, straightforward, you can agree or disagree. So when you see the document, I'm very curious to hear what you think about it. And then as an overriding principle, this must be possible to implement at very low cost. Can it be done at low cost? Yes, it has been done at low cost, at scale. Yeah.
So I agree with all of that, and to pick up directly, Nick, on your point, yes, trying to create one global registry with one global set of principles, we're probably not going to happen in our collective lifetime. The world is too far removed from that, and we see that from two drivers. Driver number one is that each regulator is kind of going down its own path. Each regulator is kind of saying, we heard today, just the presentation before already, Ireland, Spain, UK, and trust me, fully aware right now, there's 26 other regulators looking at this. 26 other regulators are actually looking at. Now, the good news is that this is actually a really sensible direction for restoring trust. The bad news is we do not want 26 different solutions. So the goal is to try and find the concept of, on one hand, recognizing each country, each region will have its own variances. So, for instance, sender IDs is something that is here in the UK. There's no concept of alphanumeric sender ID, at least in the SMS space, in the USA. Whether the guidance will be that in contents you can have control on the calls to action, on the URLs, etc. So recognize each country will emerge in its own way, but let's create a set of principles that can be common, plus a really important point, which is if we can enable cross-regional, cross-jurisdictional engagement and alliances. What does that mean? So if you look at it from three perspectives, and here the MEF can play a really important role. So you end up with National Registry ABC in 3 different countries. Wouldn't it be marvelous if as a enterprise, which is a global enterprise, is going to able to go through the process of, I've gone through the KYC process, I've gone through the right to use check, this is my brand name, this is my brand logo, these are the numbers that kind of represent me in countries ABC. I've gone through that process, now I can enable ideally a really smooth, possibly seamless process whereby that can now happen across multiple countries. So looking at the basis of, on an international basis, how can you accelerate the efficiency from a global brand perspective, whether that's at the brand sending it or whether that's as an A2P player, to be able to create onboarding efficiencies so that you can have it almost one registration, and that kind of gives you the globe, if at all possible. I agree that's somewhat nirvana to look at, but there's definitely ways in which you can help drive that forward.
Well, it plays into tomorrow's topic, identity and all of that also, because the new technologies, well, certificates and all that, will of course help this initiative here. When a brand has verified itself for one channel, of course they should be able to just use that identity in another channel. That will happen. And we can either lead it or we can benefit from it, but it will play into the solution we are suggesting here, that the parties in the ecosystem should be identified and verified to the required level, whatever that is.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, and especially now there's quite a bit of work going on at various of the open standards initiatives kind of around the world, at both the internet level and as well as kind of W3C, looking at this concept of an enterprise owning a kind of token which has their concept of this is the identity that we are all about. This is our verified brand name, this is our verified entity identity, and all the other elements that go into that wallet that allow the enterprise to say, this is who I am. Now let's bring this to a branded message, a verified call. That is all a kind of step in the right direction. So to directly answer your question, no, we're not trying to create one global registry. That's too scary. But we are trying to make sure that we can have as efficient process that can exist across multiple national registries and take that forward.
Yeah, so here's the other challenge I'll throw at you then. It feels like from our working group, from members I've spoken to, from the hyperscalers we've spoken to, brands are aligned. I mean, for a global brand to have to register their brand in hundreds of markets makes no sense. And they would love to see a way to register their brand once in one market, and that would be applicable pretty much everywhere. For CPaaS providers, aggregators, and operators, same thing. If they don't have to register brands in each of their markets or across 3 operators in the same market, it would make life much easier. So we seem to have alignment with all the key stakeholders in the industry, but why has it taken us 2 years to get to where we are now? What's making this so slow?
Yeah, Tor, what's the answer? Why have we been taking 2 years?
I think the group wasn't willing to face the facts initially, and we just needed to be brutally honest. That's my opinion.
Yeah, listen, this is what we've just been describing. It is a big change, right? Big changes which on one hand, we as an industry need to help lead and take that initiative to make sure we can restore trust at this inflection point. And on the other hand, we're being driven by, say, 5 regulators that we know, 26 regulators that we're going to find out soon. But this takes time and effort, right? This is a big change that we're highlighting. We've got 5 or 6 countries which have gone down the route so far. If we can kind of create this common set of principles, common set of possibly technologies at some point, this will really help us move forward. But it's not easy. It's not easy. But I think the drivers that we see now, both being driven by restoring trust and by the regulators, say that we should be speeding up our activity. You are all more than welcome and positively encouraged to invest your time and effort in joining the Trust and Messaging Working Group. We appreciate all of your time and effort if you would like to join, and hopefully we can move forward on these principles and start working on the second document, which is the technology kind of behind the scenes to kind of make this happen.
Yeah. And last for me, I wish there were more operators in the room, and we will need a lot of operator feedback, because in the end, the operators, they own the road network or the messaging network. Regulators, of course, play the regulator's role, but for this to happen, it really needs the backing.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and just to summarize those next steps, I mean, we've kind of said them already, but just so it's clear in your mind, what we've done is we've completed that first draft of the guiding principles. They're on the MEF website. I don't have a QR code to it here today, but I will share that link widely. We encourage you to take a look at it. Next steps are, we decided we're going to all the key stakeholders, anyone who would be impacted by this. So operators, aggregators, CPaaS providers, vendors, firewall providers, but we decided to start with the hyperscalers because we felt that if we could get buy-in from the hyperscalers, we could then go to the other stakeholders and say, look, these big hyperscalers have bought into it. And the good news is that we've spoken to 2 and we have meetings with a 3rd. And the 2 that we spoke to were broadly in favor of what we'd written. with one interesting feedback we had was a challenge around the definition of business messaging. What is business messaging? What is commercial? What's consumer? What's conversational? And for this hyperscaler, it's important to know because it determines which of the millions of SMSs they send daily need to be registered and go through the whole vetting process and which don't, right? So they obviously have skin in the game to ensure that only the right type of messaging is required to be registered.
I would just add briefly, one of the reasons for going to the hyperscalers as well, as we've seen from the presentations earlier today, they are the ones who are making right now the big decisions of let's move away from SMS, let's move away from SMS OTP. Their perspective increasingly, sadly for us, is that SMS is no longer a trusted message, a trusted vehicle. Let's look at other alternatives. The faster we as an industry can turn around to them and say, actually, there are some good plans underway for us to help restore that trust in the SMS side. That gives them the confidence of actually, you know what, let's think about this in a slightly more picture, and perhaps we can actually, through restoring trust, we can actually ensure that we can continue to enjoy the benefits and fruits of our industry. So that's one of the reasons. And the good news is, as I say, we've had really positive feedback, so that kind of given us the extra confidence to move and take this forward.
Yeah. So that's sort of the summary of the roadshow. Get buy-in from as many key stakeholders as we can, speak to the regulators. And to be very clear, we're not going to regulators to say, regulate us. We're going to regulators to say, you don't need to regulate us because we have these principles and we have this way of doing things, this methodology that will take care of the problem ourselves. I'm not sure. I don't have the timing, Dario, so I'm not sure how much we had left. But maybe there's a. I was expecting time on my monitor. Is there any questions? Just we have one question. Sorry.
Yeah, and just before Lee's question, I think the main question is, what time is lunch?
Yeah, exactly.
And not until we all agree that we all go do something. One question. Next lunch, but no pressure.
There's two parts to the question, but I'll make the first one rhetorical. Talk about restoring trust. A lot of the degradation in trust is to do with price inflation. So I'll park that. But the real question is, who pays? Where deals, SMS deals are won and lost on 1% swings in margin, who pays for these services?
Although rhetorical, let me actually address the first point, which is, I think it's fair to say as an industry, we're probably unable for us to deal with the price inflation as an industry. However, pleasing from some perspective, frightening as hell from another perspective, we are seeing increasingly various regulators getting actively involved at looking at the pricing inflation that's happening and beginning to threaten, that's probably the right word, threaten, that if this inflation continues, then they will take action and actually bring SMS into a regulated market, which is probably not going to be in the collective interest of the entire industry. So from one perspective, the regulator there could be, in inverted commas, our friend, and I use that word very carefully here, to try to look at the point of a price inflation. On your second point about who pays, so ultimately, this is enabling the enterprise to be able to send trusted communications. And therefore, the typical model that we see is whereby there's a small charge that's levied, really small charge that's levied at the enterprise level. You want to be able to have the privilege and pleasure of being able to send a trusted message or a trusted call. Then in order for that to happen, you need to be verified, your assets need to be assessed and KYC'd and verified. All of that requires a small cost, and as Tor rightly pointed out, as long as this can be done in a really cost-efficient manner, right, and in a fair governance model as well, right, that kind of gives the neutrality and the trust to all of this, then that can be a really powerful basis for enabling trusted communication.
Let me just tag on to your answer there. Yes, it needs to be a reasonable cost, it's worth it. And it cannot be hundreds of dollars or all of that. Just as a reference point, there is a registry in the US where the entry price is $4 for the brand to register. Is it 4? Is it 10? Is it 15? But it's got to be a small part of the communication cost to the point that there is no question about it. depending on the service, depending on the risk, there will be different levels of verification that needs to be adapted. And in the end, carriers, again, who own the network will probably decide what the levels should be and what is a reasonable cost so they can compete.
I feel like we're going way over. So thanks everyone. Thank you, Ellie. Thank you, Tor. Cheers.